Chartered flights, matching outfits, a $40,000 resort in Naples, Florida. 1 month later, not a single one of them drove 2 hours to watch me get married. Too exhausting, my mother said. We just traveled, my father added. Maybe next time, my sister texted, with a laughing emoji. 34 days after that, my phone lit up with 215 missed calls, texts, and voicemails from every last one of them. They'd just found out who my husband really was. And suddenly, 2 hours didn't seem so far. But here's what none of them knew, and what I'm about to tell you. The distance was never the problem. They were. Before I go on, if this story hits close to home, take a moment to like and subscribe, only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. My name is Stella. I'm 31, and this is how I lost my family and found out I never really had one. Let me take you back to a Saturday in March, the day I realized I'd been auditioning for a role I was never going to get. The Townsend family lived in Falls Church, Virginia, in a 5-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch that my mother repainted every spring. Farrow and Ball always, because Patricia Townsend did not do Home Depot. The dining room table sat 8. The linen tablecloth came from Restoration Hardware, and every Sunday dinner, there was a seating order that nobody talked about but everybody understood. My mother sat at the head. My father, Richard, sat to her right, close enough to nod at the right moments, far enough to stay out of the way. Madison and Brett sat across from each other like royalty at court, and I sat at the end, by the kitchen, next to the swinging door that bumped my chair every time someone got up for more wine. My mother ran a chain of 5 boutiques across Northern Virginia, Maison Patricia. She called it her empire. My father had a small management consulting firm, steady, respectable, unremarkable. The money was fine. The image was everything. Madison, 4 years younger, former junior Miss Virginia, now a lifestyle influencer with 45,000 followers, had married Brett Keller, a real estate developer who drove a Range Rover and talked about cap rates like other people talk about the weather. They lived in a $1.2 million townhouse in Alexandria. Everything about their life looked expensive. Everything about their life was supposed to. Then there was me, freelance graphic designer, 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington, a 2018 Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper I never got fixed. My mother called what I did Stella's little art thing. There's a family portrait on the mantel back in Falls Church. It was taken 3 Christmases ago. If you look at the framed version, you'll notice my face is half cut by the edge. Nobody ever reframed it. I didn't know it then, but in exactly 4 months, every person at that Sunday table would be begging me for something, and I would say no. The pattern didn't start with the wedding. It started with a painting. I was 14. The Virginia statewide Young Artists Competition had 1,200 entries that year, and mine won first place. An oil landscape of the Shenandoah Valley I'd spent 4 months on. My art teacher, Mrs. Calloway, cried when they called my name. My mother had promised she'd be in the 3rd row. She wasn't. The 3rd row was empty. The whole section was empty. While I stood on that stage at the Richmond Convention Center, holding a plaque with my name engraved in brass, my mother was 40 miles away at a bridal shop with Madison, getting her fitted for the Junior Miss Virginia pageant. Mrs. Calloway drove me home that night. I walked through the front door holding my plaque, and my mother looked up from the couch where she was pinning Madison's sash and said, "Oh, sweetie, I'm so sorry. But Madison's pageant is in 2 weeks, you understand. Your little painting will still be there tomorrow." It wasn't there tomorrow. It was never hung anywhere. Not in the hallway, not in the living room, not even in my bedroom, because I couldn't look at it without seeing that empty third row. Madison's Junior Miss Virginia crown, though, that sat on the living room shelf for the next decade, still had glitter on it when I moved out. Years later, when I was 24 and cleaning out the garage to help my dad make room for a new workbench, I found the painting. It was under a box of Madison's old pageant sashes, face down, wrapped in a trash bag. I stopped painting after that. Not because I'd lost the talent. I'd lost the audience I thought I needed. It would take me another 7 years to realize I'd been looking for the wrong audience all along. I met David at a coffee shop in Georgetown on a Thursday afternoon in October. He was reading a dog-eared copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. I was sketching a logo concept on my iPad. He asked if I was an artist. I said freelance designer. He said, same thing, just with invoices. I laughed. He bought me a second coffee. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans that day. Drove a Toyota Tacoma with mud on the wheel wells. He told me he worked in investments. I pictured a guy with a Schwab account and a spreadsheet hobby. We dated for 8 months before I found out the truth, and it didn't come from David. It came from Nora, my best friend since freshman orientation at UVA, now a corporate attorney in DC. We were at her apartment splitting a bottle of Malbec when she pulled up an article on her phone and turned the screen to face me. Stell, she said, your boyfriend is on the Forbes 30 under 40 list. David Ashford, founder and CEO, Ashford Capital Partners, a private equity fund managing $2.3 billion in assets. I stared at his photo in the article, same flannel, same easy grin, and felt the floor tilt. When I confronted him, he didn't apologize. He explained. My dad's business partner robbed him when I was 12, he said, sitting across from me at our usual booth. I watched money turn people into strangers. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. I wanted to know, if I met someone, would they stay if they thought I had nothing? I stayed. And I kept his secret. Not for him. For me. I wanted my family to love me for me, not for what my husband's name was worth. Nora warned me. If your family ever finds out, they'll suddenly become very interested in you. I told her she was being cynical. She told me she was being accurate. David proposed on a Saturday morning. No restaurant, no skywriting, no flash mob. Just the two of us on a bench at Great Falls Park, watching the Potomac crash over the rocks. The ring was a sapphire, salon blue, 3 carats, set in platinum. To anyone who actually knew stones, it was extraordinary. To my family, it looked nice. I posted a photo to the family group chat that evening. Ring on my finger, David's arm around me, the falls behind us. I typed, he asked, I said yes. My mother's response came 14 minutes later. That's nice, sweetie. Then, immediately, girls, has anyone finalized the color palette for Madison's reveal? I'm thinking blush and gold. Thoughts? That was it. That was my engagement announcement in the Townsend family. When Madison got engaged 2 years earlier, my mother hired a photographer to capture Brett on one knee at the Jefferson Memorial. She threw an engagement party for 80 people at their country club. She posted 14 times on Instagram in a single weekend. I know because I liked every single one. For me, a heart emoji and a pivot to balloon colors. I sent out wedding invitations 3 months before the date. Willowbrook Vineyard, Virginia. A beautiful property in the Shenandoah foothills, exactly 1 hour and 50 minutes from Falls Church by car. I chose it because the wisteria bloomed in March, and the ceremony arbor overlooked the Blue Ridge. Also because it was close to home, easy to get to, no planes required. 6 weeks passed. Not a single RSVP came back. I started calling. My father picked up on the third ring and hemmed for 30 seconds before he said, "Your mother thinks it might conflict with Madison's schedule. Madison's baby isn't due for 4 months, Dad." Silence. Long, heavy, familiar silence. I should have seen it then. But hope makes you keep your eyes half shut when they should be wide open. Madison's gender reveal was held at the Ritz-Carlton in Naples, Florida. Event planner, balloon arch that cost more than my monthly rent, a live jazz band, drone footage of the confetti drop over the Gulf. My mother had the whole thing catered with a raw bar and a 6-tier cake in the shape of a baby carriage. 23 family members flew in. Aunt Linda from Connecticut, Aunt Rachel from Oregon, Uncle Jim from Washington State. Cousins I hadn't seen since my grandmother's funeral showed up in matching blush sundresses because Patricia Townsend had sent a group email with a mood board and a mandatory dress code. I flew down too. Paid for my own ticket, my own hotel room, sat at a table near the kitchen, the same position at every family function, just with better lighting. David came with me. He wore a navy polo and khakis. Nobody asked him a single question all night, except Brett, who leaned across the table during dessert and said, "So what do you do?" "Investments," David said. Brett smirked. "Like a day trader thing?" David sipped his wine. "Something like that." Then Brett turned to his buddy Greg across the table and started in on his favorite topic, himself. "I'm trying to get a meeting with Ashford Capital," he said, loosening his tie. "Biggest PE fund doing coastal development on the East Coast. If I land them, we're talking generational wealth." He slapped the table. "Whoever runs that fund, I'd kill to get 15 minutes with him." David sat 3 feet away. I squeezed his hand under the tablecloth. He didn't flinch. I overheard my mother near the cake table telling Aunt Linda the total cost, $40,000. She'd contributed $15,000 of it herself. "Nothing but the best for my Maddie," she said, dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed cocktail napkin. I thought about my wedding invitations, sitting unanswered in 23 mailboxes, and I clapped when the confetti fell. The RSVPs started coming back 4 weeks before my wedding. Every single one said the same thing: decline. "Aunt Linda, we just flew to Florida last month, sweetie. We're completely travel exhausted." Connecticut to Virginia is a 4-hour drive. Connecticut to Naples is a 3-hour flight. But exhaustion, apparently, is directional. Aunt Rachel: "It's just so far for a weekend, Stell." She'd flown 5 hours from Portland for a gender reveal. A 2-hour drive to Virginia was far. Madison: "I'm pregnant, Stell. I can't be bouncing around. Send pics, though." She was 5 months along, the same 5 months along she was when she flew to Florida and danced until midnight in heels. My father texted, "I'll try, Stella. You know how things are." He didn't try. He didn't come. And then, 10 days before the wedding, my mother called. I recorded the call. Virginia is a one-party consent state, and Nora, my attorney best friend, had told me months ago to start documenting. I didn't know why at the time. I just trusted her. "Honey," my mother said, her voice dipped in that saccharine tone she used when she was about to say something cruel. "It's just a small ceremony anyway, right? It's not like Madison's reveal. That was a real event. Don't take it personally." I held the phone away from my face and looked at the invitation on my desk. Cream cardstock, gold lettering, Willowbrook Vineyard, March 15th, the date my life was supposed to change. 23 invitations, 23 declines, and my mother had the composure to call my wedding not a real event. I didn't cry that night. I opened my laptop and screenshotted every text, every RSVP card, every excuse. I saved them in a folder on Google Drive. Nora had told me, document everything, not for revenge, for clarity. I didn't know yet how clear things would get. Willowbrook Vineyard sat on 32 acres of rolling green in the Shenandoah foothills. The ceremony arbor was draped in wisteria, purple and white, cascading like something out of a painting I might have done once, when I still painted. 60 white chairs, 30 on the left for David's side, 30 on the right for mine. David's side filled up by 3:15. His mother, Margaret, a retired Georgetown law professor, sat in the front row in a champagne-colored Oscar de la Renta sheath. His brother flew in from San Francisco. His college roommate, his CFO, his best friend from summer camp in Maine. 30 chairs, 30 people. My side had Nora, 3 friends from UVA, 2 former co-workers from the design firm where I'd spent my first 2 years out of school, 6 people, 24 empty chairs. The wedding planner, a sweet woman named Darcy, who'd been professionally cheerful all morning, touched my elbow and whispered, "Should we rearrange the seating? Move some guests over?" I looked at those 24 chairs. The afternoon light hit them like a photograph. "Leave them," I said. "I want to remember this." David found me 10 minutes before the ceremony. He held both my hands and said, "Their absence is not your failure, it's their loss. And one day, they'll know exactly what they missed." Margaret read a poem during the ceremony, something about roots and rivers and the people who choose to stay. I cried. Not from sadness, from the sudden, sharp clarity that I had spent 31 years begging for love from people who didn't have any to give. After the ceremony, while guests drank Virginia Viognier under the arbor, Nora pulled me aside. She held up her phone. My mother had posted an Instagram story that same afternoon, a photo of brunch with Madison at a cafe in Alexandria. Caption: Mother-Daughter Day. Same day, same afternoon, 2 hours away. Eggs Benedict instead of her eldest daughter's wedding. I left those chairs empty on purpose, not as a guilt trip, as a receipt. 3 days later, I was still in the family group chat. I hadn't left it, partly out of habit, partly because I wanted to see what they'd say. What they said was worse than silence. Madison sent the first message. "So how was the little wedding? Did you do the Pinterest thing?" My mother: "I'm sure it was lovely, sweetie. Send pictures when you get a chance." No mention of the fact that she hadn't come. No apology, no explanation. Just the serene assumption that my wedding was a footnote and the chapter had already moved on. Brett chimed in. "Heard you married some investment guy? Good for you. Day trading must be exciting." Then Aunt Rachel posted a selfie from a resort pool. She was in Cancun. The caption: "Needed this after all that traveling." She'd booked an international vacation 2 days after telling me a 2-hour drive to Virginia was too far. I read every message. I didn't respond to any of them. I just screenshotted each one, slowly, carefully, the way you photograph evidence at a scene. That evening, Nora called. "Stell, you okay?" I was sitting on the couch in my Arlington apartment, laptop open, messages glowing on the screen. David was in the kitchen making dinner, giving me space. "I'm done hoping," I said, "and I'm done being quiet about it." That night, I created a folder on my Google Drive. I named it Receipts. I uploaded everything: the RSVP cards I'd scanned, the screenshots from the group chat, the recording of my mother's phone call, a side-by-side list I'd made, who flew to Florida, who declined Virginia, and the exact mileage for each. Nora had said, "Document everything, for clarity." I didn't know what I'd do with that folder yet. I just knew that clarity had a weight to it, and I was finally holding it in both hands. I need to pause here for a second. If you're watching this, and you've ever been the one whose calls go to voicemail, whose milestones get a "that's nice," while someone else gets a standing ovation, I see you. Hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but because your story matters too. Now, what happened next? Let me tell you. 34 days of silence, and then absolute chaos. 2 weeks after my wedding, the first cracks appeared in Brett Keller's empire. Though empire is generous for what turned out to be a house of cards held together with bravado and bad math. His luxury condo project, the Keller Residences in Virginia Beach, was supposed to be his masterpiece. 42 waterfront units, rooftop infinity pool, the whole glossy brochure fantasy. But the general contractor pulled out after Brett missed 3 consecutive progress payments. Then the bank sent a notice. Produce $1.8 million within 60 days, or face foreclosure on the construction loan. Brett started dialing. He called 12 private equity funds in 2 weeks. 11 said no, after due diligence turned up what any competent accountant would have caught: overvalued collateral, missing insurance bonds, and $340,000 in operating expenses that didn't have a single receipt attached. The 12th fund hadn't responded yet. That fund was Ashford Capital Partners. They specialized in distressed assets. They were the last door still open, and Brett was crawling toward it on his hands and knees. "If I don't get this meeting, we lose everything," Brett told Madison on the phone one night. His voice cracked. "The townhouse, the cars, everything." Meanwhile, my mother's boutique chain was hemorrhaging. 2 of her 5 Maison Patricia locations had seen revenue drop 40%. Lease renewals were coming due, and her landlords weren't negotiating. She needed a cash infusion of at least $200,000, money she didn't have and couldn't borrow. And my father, quiet, passive Richard, had just lost his firm's largest consulting client. He didn't know yet that the client had connections to David's network. Nobody knew yet. That was the thing about dominoes. You don't hear them falling until the last one hits the floor. The family that wouldn't drive 2 hours for my wedding was about to discover that the answer to all their problems was sitting across from me at the breakfast table every morning. It happened on a Tuesday. Brett's business partner, Greg Mitchell, was putting together a pitch deck for Ashford Capital. Standard prep work: research the fund, learn the portfolio, find an angle. He pulled up the firm's website, then Googled David Ashford, CEO, Ashford Capital. The Forbes article loaded first. 30 under 40 in private equity. A profile photo of David, clean-shaven, confident, wearing a sport coat over a white shirt. The same face, the same eyes, the same quiet half-smile Greg had seen at a dinner table in Naples, Florida, 3 months ago. Greg stared at the screen. Then he turned his laptop toward Brett and said, "Isn't this the guy from your wife's sister's wedding invite? The one in the flannel at the gender reveal?" Brett leaned in. His face went from confused to white in under 3 seconds. He grabbed his phone and called Madison. Madison called Patricia. Patricia called Richard. Richard opened his laptop and typed David Ashford Capital into Google, and the Bloomberg profile confirmed everything. Assets under management, $2.3 billion. Founder and CEO, David Ashford. I know all of this because Madison told Brett, Brett told Greg, and Greg told a mutual acquaintance who eventually told Nora. The game of telephone moved fast. What struck me, when Nora relayed it all over the phone 2 days later, was what nobody said. Not one person in that chain said, "We should have been at her wedding." Not one. The very first words out of my mother's mouth, according to Madison's retelling, were, "This changes everything. Call her. Be nice. Be nice." After 31 years of being invisible, my mother's instruction to the family wasn't apologize. It was, be strategic. I'm not sure what hurt more, the original absence or the calculated return. Day 34, a Saturday morning in late April. I woke up to my phone vibrating on the nightstand like it was trying to escape. The screen was dense with notifications, a wall of names I hadn't seen light up my phone in over a month. I picked it up and scrolled. 47 missed calls, 89 text messages, 31 voicemails, 48 emails and Facebook messages, 215 points of contact from people who couldn't find 2 hours for a drive to Willowbrook. My mother, 12 calls and 3 voicemails. "Stella baby, call me back. I miss you so much. Let's do lunch this week. Bring David. We'd love to get to know him better." Madison, "OMG. Stell, why didn't you tell me? David is like, famous. We should all get together. Brett would love to meet him properly." Brett, the same man who'd called David a day trader 3 months earlier, left a voicemail that sounded like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. "Hey Stella, it's Brett. Listen, I think David and I got off on the wrong foot. I'd really love to buy him a drink, talk shop, man to man." Aunt Linda, who'd been travel exhausted. "We feel terrible about missing the wedding. When can we visit?" Aunt Rachel, fresh off Cancun. "Stella, thinking of you. Let's plan something soon." My father sent a single text. "I'm sorry, Stella. I should have been there." He was the only one who mentioned the wedding. But even his timing, 34 days later, the exact same week the Forbes article circulated, felt less like remorse and more like recalculation. David sat beside me on the bed, reading over my shoulder. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "Your call. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I set the phone face down on the nightstand. 2 hours had been too far from my wedding. But a phone call to a billionaire's wife? Suddenly no distance at all. I didn't answer a single one. The doorbell rang on a Thursday morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it and found my mother standing in the hallway of my Arlington apartment building, holding a Williams-Sonoma gift basket and wearing a Chanel tweed jacket I'd seen her buy online last fall when she thought I wasn't paying attention. "Stella!" She pulled me into a hug, tight, theatrical, the kind of embrace she reserved for public performances. "I've missed you so much, baby." She walked in without waiting to be invited. Her eyes moved fast, cataloging the apartment. 1 bedroom, IKEA shelving, a desk covered in client mock-ups. Then her gaze snagged on the painting above the couch, an abstract oil piece in deep blues and silvers. She glanced at it and moved on. She didn't know it was an original by a Georgetown gallery artist, a wedding gift from Margaret Ashford. It had cost $45,000. My mother walked right past it. She set the gift basket on the counter and pivoted to the reason she'd come. "So, David works in finance? Brett says he's quite accomplished. We'd love to have you both over for dinner, at our house, like family." "You want to have dinner," I said. "As family, the family that didn't come to my wedding." "Oh, honey, let's not dwell on that. You know how busy everyone was." She waved her hand like she was brushing crumbs off a tablecloth. "Now tell me about David's work. Is he—" "Mom," I stepped forward. "You didn't come here because you miss me. You came because you Googled my husband." Her smile tightened. For 1 second, the mask slipped. I saw the flash of irritation she usually reserved for store managers who questioned her returns. "That's unfair, Stella. I'm your mother." "Then act like one." I held the door open. She stood there for 3 full seconds before she picked up her gift basket and left. Through the window, I watched her get into her car, and in the passenger seat, waiting, was Madison. They'd come together. They'd planned this. You forgot my art show, my graduation, and my wedding. But you remembered my husband's net worth. I made a note of that. When sweetness didn't work, my mother switched to pressure. Within 48 hours of my closing the door on her, every phone I owned started ringing with a coordinated campaign that would have impressed a political action committee. Madison called first. Stell, Mom is really hurt. You're being selfish. All she wanted was dinner. Is that really so terrible? Then Brett, via email, and he CC'd Madison, as if this were a board meeting. Stella, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'd love to discuss a potential business synergy with David. This could benefit the entire family. Let's set up a call. Aunt Linda. Stella, don't be difficult. Your mother cares about you. My father, by text. Please just come to dinner. It'll blow over. And Aunt Rachel, the one who'd flown to Cancun instead of my wedding, posted on Facebook that week. Family is everything, and tagged me in it, publicly, so everyone could see how devoted she was. I blocked 8 numbers. They called from new ones. I blocked those too. They used other people's phones. The apartment felt like it had been placed under siege by people who'd never once knocked on the door when I was just Stella. David offered to step in. He could have made one phone call, one sentence from the CEO of Ashford Capital, and it all would have stopped. I said no. If you fight this for me, they'll never respect me. They'll just fear you. That's not what I want. He didn't push it. He made me dinner instead. Pasta with lemon and capers, and a glass of the same Viognier we'd served at the vineyard. We ate in silence, and the silence felt like a fortress. They thought I was being stubborn. They had no idea I was being deliberate. The voicemail came at 11:14 on a Wednesday night. My mother's voice was trembling, soft and fractured in a way I'd heard maybe 3 times in my life. Stella, I know I haven't been perfect. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm your mother. Whatever happened, whatever I did wrong, don't shut me out. Please, I'm begging you. I sat on the edge of my bed and listened to it 3 times. My chest ached. Tears slid down without permission. She sounded real. She sounded broken, and I almost called her back. My thumb hovered over the green button, and every memory of standing in that kitchen being told I was enough, but clearly never enough for them, fought against the 14-year-old girl still living inside me who just wanted her mother to show up once. David was in the doorway. He didn't speak. He didn't move toward me or away. He just stood there, and in the quiet, I called Nora instead. She sounded real, Nora. Maybe I'm being too hard. Stell. Nora's voice was gentle and firm at the same time. Open the folder. Read the texts. Read what she said about your wedding. Then decide. I opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen filled the dark bedroom. I clicked on the folder labeled Receipts and pulled up the screenshot from 2 days before my wedding, a message my mother had sent to Madison, which Madison had accidentally forwarded to the wrong group chat. Don't waste your Saturday on Stella's little ceremony. She'll be fine. She always is. That was the message she'd sent to every family member. The reason no one came. It wasn't distance. It wasn't schedules. It was Patricia Townsend, quietly telling 23 people that her eldest daughter's wedding wasn't worth their time. I closed the laptop, wiped my face, and I thought about the last time I'd heard my mother cry. 3 years ago, when she'd wanted my father to co-sign a loan for her boutique expansion. She wasn't crying because she'd hurt me. She was crying because I'd stopped being useful. Let me ask you something, and be honest with yourself. Have you ever caught someone crying crocodile tears? That moment when you realize the tears aren't for you, they're for what they need from you? If you know that feeling, drop a crocodile in the comments. And if you're wondering what I did next, trust me, I spent weeks planning it. Stay with me. I sat at the kitchen table the following Saturday with David on my left and Nora on my right. Coffee was cooling in 3 mugs. A legal pad sat in front of me. My handwriting on it was small and even. "I'm not trying to destroy them," I said, and I meant it. "But I'm done pretending their behavior is acceptable. If they want access to David, they go through the same process as anyone else. No family discount on basic human decency." David leaned back in his chair. "You should know. Brett submitted a pitch deck to Ashford Capital 2 weeks ago through the standard intake process. My acquisitions team flagged it." "Flagged it how?" "3 red flags. Brett overvalued his collateral by roughly 30%. His construction project is missing a required insurance bond. And there's $340,000 in operating expenses that can't be accounted for. No invoices, no receipts, just line items with no documentation." He paused. "My team was going to reject it before any of this. The numbers don't work." Nora looked at me. "So the deal dies on its own merits." "Exactly," David said. "I didn't reject him because of Stella. I rejected him because his business isn't sound. That distinction matters, legally and personally." I nodded. The plan wasn't complicated. I didn't need to scheme or manipulate. I just needed to stop intervening, stop smoothing things over, stop being the invisible bridge between my family's problems and solutions they hadn't earned. There was one thing, though: the Henderson Foundation Charity Gala, 3 weeks away. David was receiving the Leadership Award. 400 guests, black tie. If my family found out, and I was certain they would, they'd be there. Nora slid a slim binder across the table. Inside, printed screenshots, scanned RSVP cards, the mileage comparison chart. "Just in case," she said. "This isn't a weapon, it's a mirror." I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to stop lying to themselves about who they were. The rejection letter arrived at Keller Development Group on a Monday, delivered on cream-colored Ashford Capital letterhead, 100-pound cotton stock, embossed logo. It was signed by the VP of Acquisitions. Not David. Standard operating procedure. The CEO never signed deal rejections. But Brett didn't know that. The letter was 3 paragraphs of professional courtesy wrapped around a verdict. After thorough due diligence review, the risk profile of the Keller residences does not meet our current investment criteria. Specifically, overvaluation of pledged collateral, inadequate construction insurance bonds, and unresolved discrepancies in reported operating expenses. Brett read it standing in his office. Then he sat down. Then he put his head in his hands. He called Madison that afternoon. I learned later, again, through the chain that always led back to Nora, that it was the first time Madison had ever heard Brett cry. That evening, Brett tried to reach David directly. He called the main Ashford Capital office line. The receptionist was polite and immovable. "Mr. Ashford does not accept unsolicited calls. If you'd like to submit a formal inquiry, I can provide the appropriate email address." Brett hung up. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes. Then he called Patricia. "I need Stella to get David to reconsider," he said. "If she doesn't do this, we're done. We lose the townhouse. We lose everything." My mother, the woman who'd told 23 people to skip my wedding, said 4 words: "Leave it to me." Within a week, she had purchased a table at the Henderson Foundation Charity Gala. $5,000 for a seat in the same room as the son-in-law she had never once bothered to meet. $5,000 to fix what 2 hours of driving would have prevented. The irony sat in my chest like a stone. While Brett scrambled, my mother's own empire was collapsing. Maison Patricia had 5 locations across Northern Virginia. That spring, 2 of them received lease renewal notices with a 35% rent increase. The landlords weren't negotiating. Online shopping had been eating into her foot traffic for years, and Patricia's response had been to ignore it entirely. The bitter part? I'd offered to help. 2 years earlier, sitting at that same Sunday dinner table, at the end, by the kitchen door, I'd told her I could design a full e-commerce website for Maison Patricia. Brand identity refresh, online store, social media integration. I'd do it for free. A gift. My mother had smiled the way she smiled at children who say something naive. Sweetie, stick to your little drawings. Retail is a different world. Now that different world was closing in on her. She needed at least $200,000 to keep 3 locations afloat, money to cover lease renewals, back vendor invoices, and a payroll she'd been juggling for months. The bank wanted a co-signer or an outside investor. She had neither. When she heard Brett talking about Ashford Capital, something clicked in her mind. I could see it forming, even from a distance. The calculation, the pivot. If David could save Brett's project, maybe he could save her boutiques too. 2 problems. 1 billionaire son-in-law. She called my father that evening. We need to be at that gala, whatever it costs. Richard had a contact at the Henderson Foundation. He bought the table. $5,000 Patricia didn't have, charged to a credit card she was already behind on. Margaret Ashford called me the day after the purchase went through. Darling, she said, a Townsend just reserved a table at the gala. Is that your family? I looked out the window at the Potomac, silver in the afternoon light. It was. The night before the gala, I stood in the Georgetown penthouse trying on the dress David had picked out for me. Carolina Herrera, black, floor length, a clean, quiet kind of beautiful. The kind that doesn't announce itself but stays in the room long after you've left. I still kept my 1 bedroom in Arlington. I hadn't given it up. That's who I was before, I'd told David once. I don't want to forget her. The penthouse had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Potomac. The lights on the Kennedy Center shimmered across the water. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the foyer and looked at myself. 31. Carolina Herrera. Sapphire ring catching the lamplight. And all I could see was 14-year-old Stella on a stage in Richmond, holding a brass plaque, staring at an empty row of chairs. David came up behind me. You don't have to say anything to them tomorrow. Just being there is enough. No, I said. I adjusted the neckline. They need to hear it. Not for me. For the version of me that stood on that stage at 14 and went home with her art teacher. The doorbell rang at 9. Nora. She had the binder with her, the printed receipts folder, neatly organized, tabbed, enclosed in a slim black cover. She set it on the marble kitchen counter and said, just in case. I picked it up. It was light. A few pages of screenshots, a handful of scanned RSVP cards, a transcription of 1 phone call. That was all. But every page held the weight of a promise someone had broken and never bothered to mend. I looked at myself in the mirror one last time. I'd spent 31 years making myself small enough to fit their expectations. Tomorrow, I'd stand full height. The Henderson Foundation Charity Gala was held at the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., a cathedral of a building with Corinthian columns rising 75 feet into a vaulted ceiling. 400 guests in black tie, a chamber orchestra playing Debussy near the south atrium, Dom Perignon on every table. $500,000 raised for education nonprofits before the first speech was even given. David and I arrived by town car. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. I carried a small Bottega Veneta clutch, just big enough for my phone and a few folded pages. Inside, the room hummed with power. CEOs, fund managers, 2 sitting senators, a former cabinet secretary. They all knew David. They shook his hand, kissed my cheek, congratulated us on the award. "You must be Stella," one silver-haired woman said. "David never stops talking about you." I smiled. I shook hands. And across the room, at table 14, pressed against the far wall like an afterthought, I saw them. My mother, in a red dress from Nordstrom, trying its hardest to look like something more. Brett, in a suit that pulled across his shoulders. Madison, 6 months pregnant, clutching her small handbag. My father, sitting with his hands in his lap, staring at the tablecloth. They hadn't seen me yet. They were scanning the room, looking for David Ashford, the name on the program, the face from the Forbes article. They didn't know I was already here, standing 20 feet away, watching them search. The MC stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome tonight's honoree, the founder of Ashford Capital Partners and this year's Henderson Leadership Award recipient, David Ashford." David stood. I stood with him. 400 people applauded. And at table 14, my mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. For the first time in my life, I saw something on her face I'd never seen before. Fear. David spoke for 5 minutes. He was gracious, precise, and warm in the way only someone who genuinely doesn't care about applause can be. He talked about the Henderson Foundation's work in underfunded schools. He talked about the responsibility of capital. He made a room full of powerful people laugh twice and reflect once. Then he paused. He looked directly at me. "I want to close by thanking the person who reminds me every day that success isn't measured by what you build. It's measured by who stands beside you when you had nothing. My wife, Stella." The spotlight found me. I stood. 400 people rose in a wave of applause that filled the vast hall from the marble floor to the vaulted ceiling. At table 14, my mother had gone pale. Madison gripped Brett's arm so tightly her knuckles showed white. Brett's jaw was locked. My father looked down at his plate, as though the answer to his entire life might be written on the porcelain. After the speech, I watched them move. Patricia stood first, straightening her dress, lifting her chin, plastering on the bright, glossy smile she wore like armor. She cut through the crowd with Madison and Brett trailing behind her like a motorcade. "Stella!" She threw her arms wide. "Oh my God, look at you! We are so proud of you, honey!" She reached for me in front of 3 couples who were clearly watching. An embrace designed for witnesses. I didn't move. My arms stayed at my sides. "Hi, Mom. Strange seeing you here. You couldn't make it to Virginia, but DC works?" The smile cracked, just slightly. "Oh, don't be silly. We're here to support you. You're here because Brett's company needs $4.2 million. The sentence landed like a dropped glass on marble. The 3 couples turned. 2 Henderson board members, standing just behind my mother, went very still. The silence lasted 3 seconds, but it held the weight of 31 years. My mother recovered fast. She always did. "Stella, this isn't the place." "You're right," I said. "The place was Willowbrook Vineyard, March 15th, 2 hours from your house, but you weren't there." Brett stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. "Stella, let's take this somewhere private. I have a proposal for David." I opened my clutch. I took out a single folded page and held it out to him. This is the text you sent Madison the week of my wedding. You called it Stella's little thing. Your exact words were, "Why would I waste a Saturday on that?" Brett took the paper like it was hot. That's taken out of context. I turned to my mother. My voice was steady. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't loud. "And this," I said, pulling out a second page, "is the message you sent to every family member, telling them not to come. Don't waste your Saturday on Stella's little ceremony. She'll be fine. She always is." Patricia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Then, "I never... That's not... Mom, I have the screenshot. Madison forwarded it by accident. I saved it." Madison started to cry. "Stell, you're making a scene." I looked at my sister, beautiful, pregnant, frightened, and said, "No, Madison, you made a scene. It was pink, it cost $40,000, and everyone flew to Florida for it. I just wanted 2 hours of their time. I got none." The group around us had grown. A Henderson board member stood 3 feet to my left. A Washington Business Journal reporter was 10 feet behind my mother. Nobody spoke. Nobody intervened. They just listened. I folded the pages, slid them back into the clutch, and snapped it shut. "You didn't come to my wedding because it wasn't worth your time. You're here tonight because my husband is worth your money. I know the difference. And now, so does everyone in this room." Brett dropped the pretense. His voice cracked open like wet plaster. "Stella, come on. This is business. You can't let personal feelings ruin a deal worth millions." David stepped forward. He'd been standing 5 feet behind me the entire time, hands clasped, watching. His voice was calm, boardroom calm, the kind that makes powerful men go quiet. "The deal was rejected 3 weeks ago, Mr. Keller. Your financials didn't meet our criteria. It had nothing to do with Stella." Brett stared at him. You can't..." The words went nowhere. He looked like a man who'd walked into a wall he couldn't see. My mother tried one last play. She reached for my hand, her fingers closing around mine. "Honey, I'm your mother. You can't do this to family." I pulled my hand back, gently, like releasing a balloon. "You chose which family to show up for. I'm just respecting your choice." Madison was sobbing openly now, mascara on her cheeks, one hand on her belly. "This isn't fair, Stella. I'm about to have a baby. And I hope you show up for her," I said, "the way nobody showed up for me." The room held its breath. My father hadn't spoken a word. He stood at the edge of the group, slightly behind Brett, hands in his pockets. Finally, he said it. The thing he should have said 34 days ago in a vineyard under the wisteria. "Stella, I'm sorry. I should have come." I looked at him, and for 1 second, one brief, honest second, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be that 14-year-old girl who still thought her father was just quiet, not complicit. "I know, Dad, but sorry 34 days late at a billionaire's gala isn't sorry. It's strategy." I turned around, took David's arm, and walked to the main table where Margaret Ashford sat waiting, her smile small, warm, and real. Behind me, Patricia Townsend stood in the middle of 400 people, and for the first time in her life, could not think of a single thing to say. The rest of the evening played out like a temperature map. Cold radiating from table 14, warm everywhere else. My family stayed seated. Nobody in the room walked over to them. The 2 board members who'd overheard the exchange moved to opposite corners of the hall, and one of them, a woman named Helen Calder, who happened to be my father's biggest consulting client, leaned toward her husband and said something I couldn't hear. She didn't look at my father's table again. Brett tried once more. He approached a hedge fund manager near the bar, introduced himself, and pitched the Keller residences in under 60 seconds. The man sipped his bourbon, looked Brett up and down, and said, "I think you should focus on your family situation first, Mr. Keller." Then he walked away. Madison left before dessert. She cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes, then ordered an Uber home. Patricia drank 3 flutes of champagne in 20 minutes and had to be escorted to the lobby by Richard, whose face looked like it had been carved from gray stone. Meanwhile, at our table, David introduced me to the director of the Henderson Foundation. She was looking for a designer to rebrand their education initiative, new visual identity, digital campaign, outreach materials. We talked for 40 minutes. She liked my portfolio. She liked my ideas. She never once mentioned David's name during the conversation. Margaret squeezed my hand under the table. "You handled that with more grace than they deserved, Stella." A reporter from the Washington Business Journal had been at the gala. She didn't write about the confrontation. She had more tact than that. But the following week, she published a feature. "The Quiet Power Couple: How Ashford Capital's CEO and his designer wife are redefining philanthropy." My family read every word. I know because Nora told me they shared it in the group chat I'd finally left. 1 week after the gala, the bank made it official. Brett failed to secure replacement funding within the 60-day window. The construction loan on the Keller residences was foreclosed. The property reverted to the lender. Brett's personal equity, $800,000 he'd poured in over 2 years, was gone. 42 luxury condos became a half-finished concrete skeleton overlooking Virginia Beach. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Keller Development Group ceased to exist. The $1.2 million townhouse in Alexandria went on the market at a loss. Madison packed her things, what was left of them, into her mother's SUV and moved back into the Colonial in Falls Church. Then the second crack split open. While sorting through Brett's company accounts during the bankruptcy filing, Madison found what the Ashford Capital due diligence team had flagged: $340,000 in operating expenses with no receipts. She pulled the records. Credit card statements. Hotel invoices in cities where Brett had no projects. Restaurant charges for 2. A leased apartment in Norfolk under an LLC she'd never heard of. Brett had been seeing his office manager for 6 months, through the entirety of Madison's pregnancy, through the gender reveal, the matching blush sundresses, the $40,000 party at the Ritz-Carlton. Madison called me at 2 in the morning. Her voice was raw, stripped of the Instagram inflection, the casual entitlement, the easy confidence of being the family favorite. "Stell, I didn't know about any of it. I'm so sorry. Not about David. About everything. About you." I listened. I didn't hang up. I didn't comfort her either. "I'll think about it, Madison, but not tonight." I set the phone down. David was awake beside me, watching the ceiling. That was the first real thing my sister had said to me in years. But one phone call, at 2 a.m., with everything burning down around her, didn't erase what 27 years of silence had built. Maison Patricia closed 2 locations by the end of May. The lease renewals came and went without signatures. The Tyson's Corner store went dark on a Tuesday. The Fairfax shop followed the next week. Racks that once held silk blouses and Italian leather bags were stripped to bare metal. A lease available sign went up in each window before the month was out. 3 stores remained, but they were bleeding. The social fallout was quieter and deeper. The country club set in Falls Church operated on gossip the way most ecosystems operate on oxygen. Someone who'd been at the gala, or who knew someone who'd been at the gala, told someone at the spring luncheon committee what Patricia had done. She told her whole family not to go to her own daughter's wedding, and the daughter married a billionaire. That sentence moved through Patricia's social circle like a slow-acting poison. The committee chair called her the following week. "We feel the committee needs fresh energy this season, Patricia. I'm sure you understand." Helen Calder, the board member, my father's biggest client, moved her consulting contract to a different firm. She told Richard directly, "I need someone I can trust with my family business." He didn't argue. He couldn't. My mother tried one final play on social media. She posted a childhood photo of me, gap-toothed, paint on my fingers, grinning into the camera at age 7, with a caption, "My beautiful firstborn, so proud of everything you've become." I reported the post. Then I blocked her account. There was a moment, Nora told me about it later, when Patricia sat alone in the main Maison Patricia location after closing time. The fluorescent lights hummed. The racks were half empty. The mirrors reflected a woman sitting on a velvet ottoman with no audience and no script. "When did I become this person?" she reportedly asked the empty store. But she still didn't call me to apologize. She called to ask if I'd reconsider having David look at her business plan. That told me everything I needed to know. 3 weeks after the gala, I sat down at the desk in my Arlington apartment, the one I still kept, the one with the client mock-ups and the chipped IKEA lamp, and I wrote letters, one for each of them, by hand, on Crane and Company cream stationery, with a Mont Blanc pen Margaret had given me as a wedding gift. Nora reviewed the final drafts, not for sentiment, for legal clarity. She struck one line that could have been construed as a threat, and softened two others that edged into accusation. What remained was clean. The letter said, "I'm not writing this out of anger. I'm writing this out of clarity. For 31 years, I waited for this family to see me. I made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient, hoping one day it would be enough. It never was. You flew 15 states for a gender reveal. You couldn't drive 2 hours for my wedding. You found my husband in 34 days. But you never found me in 31 years. I wish you well, I genuinely do. But I won't be available anymore. Not for dinners, not for holidays, not for business proposals. This isn't punishment. This is peace. I don't need you to understand. I just need you to stop knocking on a door I've finally closed." I mailed 5 copies via USPS certified mail. Return receipt requested. Tracking numbers recorded. Delivery confirmations saved. Then I changed my phone number. Blocked every family account on every platform. Nora became the sole emergency contact. Medical situations only. David held me that evening on the balcony of the Georgetown penthouse. The Potomac moved below us, dark and steady. I leaned into him and breathed, fully, deeply, and realized something I couldn't have explained to anyone who hadn't lived it. For the first time in 31 years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. And the quiet that followed wasn't emptiness. It was the sound of a door closing on the right side. 6 months later, here's where the dominoes landed. Brett's Chapter 7 was approved by the court in August. His Virginia developer's license was revoked due to documented financial mismanagement. The divorce papers followed in September. Madison filed, citing the affair and the concealed debts. The asset division was brief because there was nothing left to divide. Madison had the baby in July. A girl. She named her Hope. She moved in with Patricia, took a part-time job at a retail store in Fairfax, her first paycheck since her pageant days. She didn't contact me. She respected the boundary. But she sent a birthday card through Nora in October. It said, "I understand now. I hope someday you'll let me try again. No rush. M." Patricia shuttered a third boutique in September. 2 locations remained. both operating at a loss. She sold her Chanel jacket on Poshmark for $1,200. Her country club membership lapsed, and she didn't renew it. The friends she'd cultivated for 30 years turned out to be the kind of friends who required a functioning credit line to maintain. My father lost 2 more consulting clients by fall. He began downsizing, let his office assistant go, moved to a shared workspace. He sent a letter to me through Nora. It didn't ask for money. It just asked to talk. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw it away either. And me. I signed a design contract with the Henderson Foundation, a full rebranding of their national education initiative. It was the largest project of my career, and I earned it on portfolio, not on pedigree. David and I bought a house in the Virginia countryside, 40 minutes from Falls Church, but a world apart. He still drove the Tacoma on weekends. I converted the sunroom into a studio. Above the fireplace in the living room, I hung a painting, an oil landscape of the Shenandoah Valley, painted by a 14-year-old girl who had won first place and waited 17 years for someone to notice. It took that long to hang it. Not because I'd forgotten about it, because I'd finally found a wall that deserved it. The card arrived through Nora on a Friday in November, handwritten on craft paper. No envelope from Hallmark. No logo. Just Madison's handwriting, which I hadn't seen since she used to leave notes on my bedroom door in middle school. Stell. I named her Hope because I want to be a different kind of mother than the one we had. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying. If it takes years, I'll wait. M. Inside the card was a Polaroid of baby Hope. Round cheeks, dark hair, wide eyes that looked startled by the flash. On the back, Madison had written, "She has your eyes." I set the photo on my desk in the studio, next to my monitor and a mug of cold coffee. I didn't call. I didn't write back. But I didn't put it away either. David saw it that evening when he came in to tell me dinner was ready. He picked it up, looked at the baby's face, and said, "She's beautiful." "She is," I said. "And I hope Madison gives her what we never got. Someone who shows up." I thought about that for a long time after he left the room. About what it means to leave a door unlocked without opening it. About the difference between forgiveness and access. About how a boundary isn't a wall. It's a gate with a lock. And only I hold the key. Madison might change. She was already changing. The 2 a.m. phone call, the handwritten card, the quiet respect for a line I'd drawn. Or she might not. People sometimes crack open and then seal back up, and you can't build your life around someone else's potential. I didn't close the door because I stopped caring. I closed it because I finally started caring about myself. I'm sitting on the porch as I tell you this. Virginia countryside in late autumn. The oaks have gone copper and gold, and the Blue Ridge sits on the horizon like a watercolor someone left out to dry. There's a mug of coffee in my hand. The good kind. The French press David makes every evening, because he says the ritual calms him after a long day of being the person everyone in the financial world wants 15 minutes with. He's inside right now, making pasta. He still makes the lemon and caper recipe from that night in Arlington. The night I blocked 8 phone numbers and ate dinner in silence with the only person who'd never once asked me to be smaller. I scroll through my contacts sometimes. Nora, David, Margaret, a handful of college friends, the Henderson Foundation team. My phone is quieter than it used to be. The group chat is gone. The Sunday dinners are gone. The empty chair at the end of the table is gone. Because I finally got up from it. My mother was right about one thing. My wedding wasn't like Madison's. Madison's was a performance. Mine was a promise. And the only people who needed to witness it were the ones who actually showed up. I open my iPad and start sketching. A new piece for the studio. The image comes easily. A single chair in a field of wildflowers. Not empty. Waiting. David steps out onto the porch, 2 mugs in hand. What are you drawing? Something I should have painted a long time ago. He sits down next to me. The crickets start up. The sky goes violet. They say the opposite of love is hate. I don't think that's true. I think the opposite of love is showing up only when it's convenient. And I think the bravest thing I ever did wasn't standing in that gala, holding receipts and speaking truth to a room full of strangers. It was the morning after, when I woke up, looked at my phone, and felt nothing missing. That's my story. And if you made it this far, thank you for listening, really. If you've ever been the empty chair at someone else's table, I want you to know you are enough. You were always enough. The problem was never you. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and check the description for more stories like this one. And if you're in the middle of your own receipts moment, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Your story matters.